Well, good morning. This is another day here in the Twisted Knot Woodshop. Today is May 6th, 2017, and generally every project in the shop is entertaining and fun and enjoyable. However, on this day, it comes out to be not quite as much fun, particularly for the purpose of what's going on here. I've been tasked to build a urn for a small child for a client, and that's what the project is. And the project is 5 inches this way, 4 5/8 that way, as you can see, and 2 5/16, call it. And it's going to be made out of walnut. And this is all out of SketchUp, by the way. In case you don't know what that is, get it, because it's an excellent program and a very, very useful tool, especially here in this shop. I can't get along without it. This is just a view of the bottom. You're looking at it. The bottom is recessed up. This dimension here is 3/8, and that's just a view with the two sides, or two of the staves taken out, to show that the bottom is in a groove around the perimeter. And the thing is that this bottom here should float, meaning it's showing in the drawing as being tight, but it's going to float in there. And the reason for that is you don't want it to, even though it's narrow, but you don't want it to expand and possibly push the staves apart. So that's going to float. And then the top that ultimately would go on here will be flush with absolutely flush with the perimeter of that. And down the road, in a future video, as this goes on, you'll see how I'll get that done so that it's exactly right. And so the problem is, I got the walnut board here, and if you look, you can see planer chatter right along here. And so it's not exactly, flat like this side is. And plus I got sapwood on one part of it, which I definitely don't want. But it's easy because I got it wider than what I need for the height of the box. So the staves themselves, the thickness of this way is 3/8. And this board is hit and miss, which is meaning that it's 13/16 supposedly, but because of this planer chatter here, it's a little bit narrower on this end than it is on this end. So I'm going to have to make, and I had already had this plan, make the bottom 5/16 and the top the same. And that way I can, after I run it through the planer, end up with the 5/16. So 5/16 is 10/16 minus the saw blade kerf. So we should get pretty darn close. So we're going to walk over to the bandsaw. And I've got this fence that has been around forever, and I want to make sure that I don't run the end of the board with the planer chatter against the fence, so I want to keep it out. And assumably, if you have an accurately set up fence and a sharp enough blade, and I should be able to resaw this pretty darn close. And so we're going to do that right now. Oh, by the way, that fence is nothing more than, well, let me show you. Nothing more than pieces. One piece is a plywood, the rest of it's particle board with some angle supports there to keep it square. And then you just, in this case, if you go to one of my other videos, you can see the bandsaw fence that I've got a video of how I made that. And so, in other words, it's a custom fence that that I made here. So I'm trying to get this darn tripod set up right. And the reason I got up there is because I wanted, you know, it's shorter the other direction going this way than it is this way. So, and I put up there for other people come in the shop and use it, and so it just makes it easier, and I don't have to explain everything. So let's run this through and see how we do. I've got this push stick. You can see it's been pushed through several times, but there's a little magnet right there that sticks on the side of the bandsaw, so I can grasp it quickly to finish pushing it through. All right, so take us move over here. So this was the planer chatter end, and the part that was riding against the fence is right there. And so if we take and measure that, right at 3/8, which is fine. The inside of the box doesn't have to be sanded. It's the outside that I'm concerned about. But this 3/8 part over here, this is going to be the bottom and the top, because that's what I want for the thickness there. The staves are going to be 3/8, and I'm at almost 7/16. So let me see. You can see that. I can't even see what you're seeing. Yep, so we're almost at 7/16. So if I run this through the planer, with those staves being 2 1/16, I only need, what's that, 16 1/2 inches. Call it 18, so I can get really pretty darn close. It probably won't get more than 17, be more than 17, so I might be able to get away from this planer chatter. So I'll pause this for a minute and get the planer set up, and then we'll push that through. See you in a bit. Okay, I've got the planer set up for the thickness that the piece will end up being. And with these kind of planers here, especially when you're planing thinner stock, it's always nice to have a sled, because the planer, as you get down closer to the bed there, sometimes will cause chatter and raise the board and really mess it up. So if you have a sled, it allows the planer, the head of the planer, to get closer without getting involved with the actual bed itself. And it's an easy thing to do. It's just a board with a stop on it. And it just slides up there, and the stop keeps the board from shooting through. And they're really handy. You should have one in the shop. Now this is a noisy little some bitch here, so you're gonna have to bear with it. There's also 2 speeds set right there in that little black knob for finishing cuts and dimensioning. We're gonna run it on the finishing, but you can't switch it unless it's running. So here we go. All right, we're going back over to the workbench. Okay, now this was the side that had the planer chatter in it from, by the way, the planer chatter came with the board when I bought it. And there's a little section here that didn't get taken out, but I don't need this. All I need is, I'm gonna call it 18 inches just to be safe, but now it's flat. And the thickness is exactly, can you see it? Can you? Can you? 3/8. So we're good there. Now, like I said, the rough side is going to be in, so I don't care about that, and it's not. It's actually will add character to the thing. It's the outside that we're concerned about. So now the next step is to cut the dado, and the reason for that is it's easier to cut the dado when it's all the staves. The grain will be up, so the staves will have the dado going this way. All right, so it's easier to cut the dados when we well, I'll show you in a second. I got to get things set up, but I'll show you here in just a bit. Okay, just a few moments ago I lied to you. I got myself confused over there at the bench. The grain is going, this way. I want the grain going horizontally, and the groove will be down here. And the reason for that is because the board would tend to, it's a thin board. It would, depending on where the locale is, it would tend to go this way. If the grain was this way, it would spread out and possibly pop the joints on the staves. So this side here will get the groove and for the bottom, and it's easier to run it all at one time and then cut here and shortly we'll cut the staves this way. And So I got this all set up, and I've got one of these gizmos here. It's a depth and height gauge, both, and it goes in millimeters and, well, metric sucks, but inches and the setting like that. So, but basically it slides up and down. And then they have, if you can't fit this into the groove that you're working into, then they have this little pointed thing that you can take this part out and screw this in there, and then that way you can get into a narrower section. And basically this just bridges across, but right now this is narrower than the groove we're going to be cutting. However, I don't know what the depth is that we got at the moment. I could use this to set the depth, but I'm going to try, and I've done that before, but I'm going to try something a little bit different this time, and see how close I can get it without, you know, because it's hard to move the blade tips back and forth and put this on there. So I'm going to try to, you know, make a cut with this piece of scrap here and then measure it with this. You just set it down and then you zero it. It's got a 0 button there, and it remembers. If I was to leave it like that, it goes up to 35/64, and if I turned it off and then turn it back on and then hit that, and it'd go right back to 0 again. So you don't have to reset it every time. Okay, so if I set it in there, oh, pretty close. All right, well, I'll cut this and then we'll pick it back up, and we'll take it over to the radial arm saw and start cutting the staves. All right, I'm over here set up at the radial arm saw, and I've got the angle set to 22.5, and I cut a block on the miter saw, and I cut 2 of them and put them, you know, together, and then I have a 22.5 inch or 22.5 degree square, and put these 2 together so that I made sure that this was truly a 22.5 degree. There's a peculiar thing about radial arm saws. First off, you got the teeth that are wider than the actual thickness of the blade. So what you do is you just take a block and you just cut a notch out of it to relieve that extension, so that this here registers truly against the body of the blade. And because we're going up and down, what I wanted to do is have a notch that's cut that's exactly the kerf of the blade, so that when I start to cut the staves, that I know exactly where the blade is going to be coming through, and I can use that notch as my registering point. But when you raise it up and down, that notch gets wider. So what you do is you bring the body of the saw out and make sure you get your angle set right with that little knob there, and you set it to your angle. This would be on the flat part of the table there, and get it set exactly right. Then you start the saw, lower it down until it just kisses the tabletop, and then you can push it back through, and then that notch, the kerf in that fence there, will be exactly in position. Because if you don't, and if you raise it up and down, that notch will get wider. And so the principle here is that you can use that notch as you know exactly where the point is going to be when you make your next cut. So we're going to start it up and make that tiny little kiss on that table, and then push it through the fence. So now, when I cut the first part of the stave, you know, it'll be the long point in this case, and then when I turn the board around, I'll have a 2 1/16 inch mark here, and then I can put each long point on that after I recut. You know, got to flip the board around, and we'll get doing that here in just a second. I've got to get the measurement set up here from this point to 2 1/16. So we'll be back in a bit. All right, I made the first bevel cut going this direction, and I've now marked out a 2 1/16 inch, I don't know if you can see it, pencil mark there from this long point to 2 1/16. And now this is where the glory of knowing how to use a radial arm saw comes in with all of the if you make the one cut, that's your saw curve. So this is my short point of the angle here. So if I put that pencil mark right there on that curve, and then I can mark it out there, and I know that every cut will be the same. So I'll just set that right there, and I mark this. If I can get my head around the arm of this saw. All right, then I take this little stick here. Where am I? This little stick here, and put it on that mark, and then draw it up. Then that mark is where each of the long points will be when I cut, and then the board will get, well, you'll see here in a second. So I just put it on there. Make sure she's right. So there's the first stave. Now what I did was I marked the back of it with chalk so that they will all stay in line. Obviously the groove would be this way, but the chalk line would be the registering. So like, where am I? The chalk line will be there so I can put all the parts in the same in the order that they come out, so that the grain stays the same or flows. Now I need to get a short point back onto here, so I just flip it over. Put the short point on the cut of the kerf there. Carry on and then continue doing what I did. And I'll cut the rest of these off camera, and we'll pick it up over there at the workbench. All right, all the bevels have been cut, and you can see how that chalk mark there will make sure that the pieces go back together, so that the grain, you know, follows, you know, along the board of what would be around the perimeter of the vessel. And in order to get them together properly, it's kind of a little bit of a trick, but you would turn it upside down so that the long points are, so that the good side is up in this case, and you have to hold them and so that they don't move. And how do you do that? Well, gosh, what you do is you make yourself, or in this case, a small type of a fence, and it's got a raised portion all the way around. So in other words, that would be one end of it, and then the other end would be drifting out here somewhere. And it's high so that it catches the blocks, and then, but you still got to hold it so that nothing moves while you're doing the tape trick. And we're going to take and just brad nail the fence to the table. And then it doesn't matter whether they're up or down. I mean, turned around, it doesn't matter but just flip the blocks over. Assuming they're all the same thickness, everything should come out just right. Okay, then you get another block, put it there, and then clamp it down if you have the right size clamp. Quit. Tells me it wants to do this. I'm gonna have to cut this fence shorter. All right, I'm gonna go off camera. I gotta cut this shorter because it's wanting to raise it up. Okay, so we're back, and I'm preparing to lay out the octagon to cut from this square piece here. And from high school geometry, what you do to determine a octagon is you take a strip of something with a hole in it, and then come to the center after you've delineated the center here, the center point, and you put a hole there. And then you pivot with this pivot point here, and a pen in this, in the hole here, and you strike an arc this way, and then you turn it, and you strike an arc, and then carry on. And then these 2 points, or 8 points, is where you connect. So in other words, from here, and here, here, and here, and you get your octagon. Well, that's kind of nice, but it's a pain in the ass. And with the glory of the internet, and some brainiac put out a calculator, and what you do is you plug in your dimension up here of what would be A, in this case 4 9/16 for that square I just showed you. So that would be A, and then A here, and then C is the distance from this edge down. In this case, it's the hell is it? 1 5/16. So, oops. Yeah, C, 1 5/16. So what I did was just cut a strip of wood to 1 5/16, and I'll just set it on the block and mark those 2 points right there, and then turn it, mark those 2 points, etc. And I'll get the octagon laid out. And now, as super incredible as SketchUp is with dimensioning, after you've drawn it to, you know, the wall thickness in this case, 3/8, you know, there's some issue there that, you know, if this ends up being a little bit thinner, then your distance in between here might be a little bit tighter than what shows on SketchUp. But I want that thing to float. I want the bottom to float in there. I don't want it to be, you know, too tight, because if it expands, I don't want it blowing out the sides. Now you got it together, even though SketchUp says it's umpty-ump this way and this way. That's good, but it's not good enough for me, because you got to figure, I got to make sure. So the easiest way to do this is, once it's together, how do you measure that? Well, in my earlier video with the dust collection system, I showed you how to measure something, an interior diameter or dimension. And what you do is you take 2 sticks and you stick, maybe I ought to go this way. You stick them in there like this until they butt, and make sure they're tight, and then you scribe a line, and then you take and pull the sticks out, hold them together, and then you measure from here to here, and that'll tell you what your dimension is in there, inside that groove. So I already got that, and which comes out to be 4 9/16. And now we're going to lay out the octagon. So this is dark wood, obviously, walnut. So we'll just take the strip, put it on there. Can you see what I'm saying? Yeah. All right. And I use a pen. Generally I don't, but on darker woods. And just spin around the perimeter or the edges. Dummy. Got the wrong. This thing's got a barked up edge, so you can't hardly use it. So you just wander around. I don't want to put the marks all the way across because I'll have to sand them out. And we're done. No, we're not. Okay, so you can see the pen marks on there. Just connect this one to this one to this one, and blah, blah, blah. All right, and then, and we'll pick this up in a second after I lay this out, and we'll go cut it off. See you in a bit. Okay, now we're over here at the cutest bandsaw ever. It's an old Monkey Ward's Powercraft model, 12-inch. It's on its little stand, and got a little LED light on there that I got from my buddy Frank. He went to IKEA and bought 4 dozen of them and started sending them out to people. And since this is all going to be, there's the lines laid out now. Since this is going to be inside, you know, we're not going to, it doesn't have to be an exact, you know, precise cut, because it's in a, you know, in a groove. So we'll just cut it on the bandsaw, and then we'll just put it where it needs to go. That's why I call it the cutest bandsaw ever. All right, walking back over to the workbench. Now, putting things together with mitered joints, you know, in this case an octagon. I've got these swell little bubber rands, my niece calls them. And I just put it there temporarily to get it so I could put that measurement in there with those two sticks so I could get an idea. Now I can take it apart and lay it out and then put the base in there. Hang on, move this around where, okay. So take the bubber rand out. And I lay this down. One, two, three, four. And if I bring it back around, if the calculations are correct, wait, I need to make sure I got the right. I think so. 1, 2, 3, 4. I already sanded the base plate down, so we're pretty close. For some reason this one side doesn't want to come in. Might have to sand it down a bit more. It seems to be a little bit tight. Okay, that's the bottom. Oh yeah, that went together a lot better. Okay, so now the bottom is in there. It can close up nice and tight. You can see the joint there closing up. And now it's time to glue it. This is the scary part. So you don't get too much glue that oozes through the joints there. But the bottom fits nice. You can hear it rattling, hear it? Rattle, 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 rattle. So that's good. All right, I'm ready to glue it together. Okay, we'll figure out how to do that here in a second. Boy. This is one of those situations where you got to get all of your ducks lined out. And so I got my bubber rands ready to go. The bottom's ready to go. I guess just, oh, you know what I ought to do? When you're gluing up stuff like this, wax paper is your best friend. That way you don't get it all over the workbench and half the world. And oh shucks, hang on. The glue straight out of the bottle is going to be awful thick for this. So, especially with the thinner material. And so what I do is take glue, put it in a container, and mix a little water with it. It makes it easier to spread, and it doesn't want to, pile up, I suppose would be a good word. So I'm going to do that right now, and then I'll pick this up in a sec. All right, when you, excuse me, when you mix water with the glue, you want just about enough to make it the consistency of like light honey. More, so it can flow. A little easier. That's about almost right. Yep, that's about perfect right there. All right, so you take an acid brush. Where am I? Take an acid brush. You can get them at Harbor Freight for, a million of them for 49 cents. And we're just going to spread them in the joints there. This is always the technical and tedious part, trying to get it spread out in there. If you were trying to squirt this out of a bottle, you would have a hard time with it, especially being thick and everything, like I said earlier. When the points come together, there won't be as much oozing out. It just takes a few seconds to do it. Kind of make sure that you got all your surfaces coated there properly. Looks like this one's a little lacking. All right. Excuse me. Okay. That's my bottom. No, this is my bottom. Isn't it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So grab us the bubber band. Be nice to have another set of hands in here, but sometimes that doesn't work. Oh, come on. These rubber bands come from a, excuse me, come from a urinary bag, you know, a catheter bag, and you can get them from like Healthcare Plus or those types of stores. They got holes in them that, you know, would adjust to the size of your leg. They're really handy. They've got good stretchability, and they work out really good. As long as you don't pull it too tight and it breaks, which has happened before. Hey, quit. I use them an awful lot on turning stuff on the lathe for holding, you know, like glue ups together. Well, just like we're doing right now. Okay. All right. Now you can see all the points have come together there, and all the points have come together there. Now I just get a wet rag and a little chisel and clean out the little bit of squeeze out there, and all I got to do is wait for it to dry, and then we can work on the top. But the bottom is floating still. Yep. Okay, we'll pick this up later on.